If you're here for What Are They Thinking, gathering consumer feedback and insights, you have reached the right place. If that's not what you're here to see, check your app. You're in the wrong room. All right. So as you may have read in the program, there you go. As you may have read in the program, there are 3 presenters in this particular session. Unfortunately, Brenda Rourke is not able to join us this morning, so Liz Heagle, Chief of Communications, Oklahoma Insurance Department, and I'm the Communications Director from the Missouri Department of Commerce and Insurance, will lead you through some communications journeys and how we work with consumers and deliver information important to them and important to our work. So Liz?
All righty. So I'm Liz Heagle. I am Chief of Communications for the Oklahoma Insurance Department. I've been with Commissioner Mulready for 7 years, and we have 1 more year before he terms out. It's been an interesting 7 years. I have a commissioner and a chief of staff who are very, they have lots of ideas. They support you in getting those ideas out, however you want to do it. And it is pretty busy all the time. I have 3 other people on my team, and so it has worked well, and I'm pretty proud of all the campaigns that we have put forth. The first campaign that we're going to look at that we did this last year was our Strengthen Oklahoma grant program. So it's basically the goal of it is to help Oklahomans fortify their homes against severe weather by providing a $10,000 grant for safer roofs. We launched this back in April, and we did a small, after talking to other states who have already put forth this campaign or this grant program, we realized we didn't want to just blast it, that we wanted to do kind of a drip campaign. So the first launch was in April, like I said, with 8 zip codes. And we were tasked with just getting the basic information out. Besides, having a web page that had all of the information, this was really new to us. So that was our first step, was getting our website, with all the information that anyone would need to apply for the grant program. Then second, we kind of had some meetings about how do we, what's the information that we want to highlight? And, from experience, you want to be very simple in how you message. And that's kind of what we did. We did simple messaging on social media. And since we had zip codes, it was a little bit easier to target. We also kind of, I'll get to that next. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. So with this campaign, we've already done 3 pilots. Our second pilot was in June, and then our third pilot was just probably 4 weeks ago. So as I said, we had 8 zip codes, then we went to another 8 zip codes, and our last pilot program had 63 zip codes. So we still have a long way to go, and we're learning so much as we move forward with this campaign. As I said, we did a dedicated Strengthen Oklahoma Homes landing page. And we have since kind of reworked it, because as you progress through each campaign, you realize that people don't, what you think you understand, the normal consumer doesn't. And, you also know from this side of messaging that people don't spend a lot of time. They don't spend a lot of time on the landing page to really understand it. What they want is they want to call someone, and they want that person to tell them, hey, this is what you need to do. So we really kind of reworked after getting a lot of feedback, and and you start getting in tune with what these questions are. And I get a lot of direct phone calls because my phone number is on most all the press releases. And so, which was great, even though it's, it interrupts your day when you get 10 phone calls, but it did give me some insight in direct insight in how to maybe adapt and change how we were messaging. But basically, using social media has been great because you can target by zip codes. And since we were doing the campaign to specific zip codes, it was amazing. We did spend a little money doing specific ads. One thing that really helped us was the earned media and getting the program director, Ashley, which I think she's in here in the far back. She knows this program backwards and forwards, and she was so great being interviewed. And that kind of, when you put someone where they're having a conversation and really talking about the program, talking about some of the things that we are challenged with in communicating to the consumer, it really kind of upped the website traffic. And so, on the website side, we can look at how long people are spending on that page. We can look, and it was interesting because at the very beginning of this campaign, people were spending maybe 30 to 60 seconds and they couldn't find what they were looking for. And so when you realize that by looking at your web traffic, you're like, what do we need to do different? And so again, we're always adapting to what we're seeing. And I have a great, Wyatt up here he's our social media guru. He spends a lot of time learning and looking at changes and he will test things. And that's kind of what I like to see is not everything works. Not everything works in what we do. And that's okay. But we're finding the simpler we are with our messaging, the better the consumer, it seems to resonate with the consumer. So, as I said, we did some earned media. We did geo-targeted digital ads in specific zip codes. Then, and I pulled some of our graphics. I mean, just like the simple one where it says new zip codes, you click through and it takes you directly to those new zip codes on our website. We tried some things. Are you ready to weather the storm? Asking a question, is that going to, inspire someone to go directly to that page and see what is this okay ready? And then, like I said, we had a lot of feedback. And the team that Ashley oversees, they get so much feedback because, consumers really do. First of all, whenever they call, if I get a call, I'll say, have you been to our website? Have you looked at what you're responsible for? Because what we were seeing is that they would get into the application process and they didn't know what they had to provide. And that stopped them, got them frustrated. So it seems like every month we are streamlining, we are listening, and we're adapting. So, like I said, we have reworked our Strengthen Oklahoma webpage a couple of times now, and the numbers are getting better as far as how long they're staying or bouncing off. So, all right, this is where it gets interesting because Wyatt provides every month analytics. He looks up and he'll look up, all of our social media where we're running ads. If we're doing digital ads, he looks at that. And he really kind of just gives me kind of just a flash of here's what's really doing well, here's what's not, and we just make changes every single month. And again, we are constantly changing up the simplicity of these ads. Our second campaign that we have been working on, and it has been going on for quite a long time since the commissioner came on board, we actually have a Medicare, we call it our MAP program. And we work with Ray, who is the director of that program, and it was really difficult reaching, even though his team goes out into, the different counties and it has different outreach with the senior population, it still is really difficult to message to them. And we have different, like right now, Medicare open enrollment. So we decided, hey, what if we do these webinars? And we can, we have a live webinar, and it's Medicare Monday. And it started just with Q&A. We had probably 4 different topics, and Ray would get on there, and, we would do a huge campaign announcing, we're getting into our Medicare Monday program. Here are the topics, here are the dates. We built up our, email list, so we're getting a lot. It seems to be growing and growing, and that's what you want from this. But it is very difficult to message to the senior population because a lot of it, from just information that we get back, is a lot of it has to be done through TV, which is terribly expensive. And it's, a lot of seniors are in these communities that it's very difficult to come in and, schedule a time with them to tell them about, what changes are coming with Medicare. So we thought this was the best tool, and it really has come in. I mean, it's, like I said, it's growing every year. It's our 5th year. We put it on YouTube, and we can constantly push it out through social media or through email, different email drip campaigns. And then we also, besides putting in our website, because it's a 30-minute webinar, and then we place it on YouTube, and then we have a link on our website. So there's different ways of, actually getting and rewatching it. We actually have done really well in the whole rewatching part of it. When we're not pushing a particular campaign, we'll push we just had this webinar last week. If you missed it, here it is. And that's worked out really well. Again, with this campaign, we do try to get Ray out to some of the morning shows. And a lot of, it's free for us, but he really is a good communicator. He's been doing this forever. So I think he really pushes our webpage. He pushes the webinars each time we get him on one of the morning shows, and that seems to get some traction as well. Let's see. I pulled just a couple of graphics. What's difficult about messaging when you're doing like Medicare is that there's so much information, and you're messaging to a different audience. And the senior population seems to spend a little more time reading. And so it's, even though it seems like there's a lot of text, we haven't really gone a different route because this seems to be working for us. So our consumer feedback, I have noticed that the senior population does not hesitate to tell you what they like and what they don't like. And we listen, they're not really messaging through social media as much, but they certainly pick up the call. I mean, they pick up the phone, give us a call, and we are listening, we're making notes, and we have changed so many things, month to month with just this consumer feedback. So it's been fun. This has been a really fun campaign. All right. And again, we get a lot of analytics that we look at every single, month. And this campaign, because it's been going on for over 5 years, really has a lot of good data. And we've pivoted somewhat to try to campaign towards the caregivers. So someone like myself who has aging parents, I want to know, I'm having to help my dad, who's 88, more with the computer. I'm having to help him make more decisions. And if I don't know about this, how am I going to help him? So we are trying really hard to also message to, kids and, adult kids and caregivers. And, okay. And I think that is all of my presentation. Between the two campaigns, they're both very different because you are messaging to, different audience. I'm going to be really interested when we get to next year with our Strengthen Oklahoma Grants program, how much that's going to change, because it's a work in progress. And we're listening, obviously, to the consumer, and it will be interesting to compare a lot of the analytics from this year to next year. So anyone have any questions about either one of these campaigns? Or I kind of went through it pretty quick. Yes, ma'am.
Did you actually solicit feedback, at least on the pilot program? Like, did you have a survey, or was it just sort of the feedback you actually received?
Okay,
to change the website.
Yeah, we did not do any kind of survey right now. What's interesting is the team that actually takes all the calls when they're doing the application, part of the application process does have questions. How'd you hear about us? And those will probably, I'm sure Ashley, as she goes into next year, she's going to look at, what the feedback she's getting from her team, and will adjust kind of some of the survey questions on the application process. But we haven't gotten there yet, and that is something, because we'll have everyone's emails from the whole application, and the people that don't make it all the way through the application process because they don't have, certain documents, or it just didn't work out for them. That will be an interesting survey as well. Did I answer every? Okay. Jeff, don't make this a hard question.
It won't be. I'm just curious. Maybe this is obvious to you at least, but you mentioned a few times how important or how useful having the targeted zip codes was to do a targeted campaign.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's so special about the zip code that allows for the targeted?
So one of the things, and I did realize I didn't explain this to you all, part of the grant program is you have to have roofing companies that have gone through the whole process for the fortified roofing to even be able to come and work on your roof. They have to be fortified through IBHS. And so that's a process. So if you have, I think that when, and Ashley, you can interrupt me if I'm saying the wrong things, but when they had the first 8 zip codes, they knew they had roofing contractors in that area that could actually put a fortified roof on. So it's now as I'm marketing and I have these 8 zip codes, and those are the only people that can apply for this grant, it's awesome because there's so much I can do digitally. Like I can go into social media and I can geo-target those particular zip codes. I can do, words like roofing and target. So when they put that in their Google search, our little ad will come up in those zip codes. You can be very specific when you're marketing for this. And I think this is why I'm enjoying this Strengthen Oklahoma grant program so much, is because we're just, we're hitting 8 zip codes. Then we close those 8 zip codes. We do 8 more. And then this last one was 63 zip codes. Well, in Oklahoma, we have 764 zip codes. So we got a long way to go. But and we're marketing to 4 million people in Oklahoma. But it's giving me more information because it's very specific. So it's very different than how I will do or work on the MAP campaign, because seniors are everywhere, so how do you get very targeted areas for the senior population? Did I answer your question? Okay.
Liz, I'll just
Yeah.
add to, the zip codes were very important, in how we chose those zip codes was based off of FEMA data and some of the PCMI data that we received through NAIC and CIPR. And so working with Jeff was very important for us to be able to obtain and look at that data, which allows Liz then to, through the communication efforts, target those specific areas for those specific reasons. So that was a lot of what went into how we chose which zip codes to move through that program.
And then, Ashley, I did want to ask you, have you guys moved forward with doing like an after survey? Because I believe you guys have completed 40 complete applications and roofing.
So we are doing some surveys as we're completing those and visiting with the homeowners to see how their experience was. So yes, we are working through that.
Okay. And so all this data that she's going to get will really help us as we move forward, because we can just start tightening it up and going, this isn't working, this is working, things like that. Anyone else? Okay, I will turn it over to Lori.
Who is going to be talking about a slide that doesn't belong to her, just in case you want to know. So Dr. Brenda Rourke, who was to be on our panel, is a communications researcher with NAIC's Center for Insurance Policy and Research. And a lot of the work in the things that I'm going to present about, I have had a good partner to be able to assist with formulating surveys and things of that nature. And that's one of the things that I just want to point out, that, having good partners for those things that you don't necessarily have the tools, the knowledge to be able to do yourself in your department is really important. So writing survey questions is an art. It's very, very easy to write questions that will lead people to give you the answers you want them to give, not the ones that they need to give. So as an example, avoiding leading or biased phrasing. How easy was it to get the help you needed from your insurance when you had a problem? Well, this question on its own assumes that that person needed help. So the phrase "how easy" implies a positive framing, even though it may bias the response. So you can see how you might have to give some thought to how you're phrasing survey questions. And there are a lot of tools we can use for this: SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, lots of different tools to be able to do surveys. So an open and unbiased approach to this. Can you describe a recent experience you've had with your insurance, such as filing a claim, updating your coverage, or seeking assistance? So just something that you need to think about if you're going to use surveys. And asking one thing at a time. I know I personally have a problem thinking about more than one thing at a time right now. So, one thing at a time, giving people things to do, focusing their attention, making the questions easy to read, easy to respond to, making that survey, no matter how many questions there may be, seem as though it's moving very, very quickly. Okay?
So can I interject real quick?
Sure.
Okay, well, I want to ask you, because we've talked about this when doing surveys. So, and we talked about this last week, kind of what your goal for this survey is. I mean, if you're trying to figure out, and let's just use campaigns for it, like let's use the Strengthen Oklahoma campaign, and we're doing a survey, you really do have to have a goal. I mean, are you trying to streamline how the application process goes? Are you trying to figure out, do we want to market to a different demographic? So I think that also when you're doing a survey, you have to have a goal of what you're trying to achieve.
I think she's reading my notes.
Oh.
I think she's So just a reminder, I'm Lori Croy, Missouri Department of Commerce and Insurance. Before I start talking about my piece of this session, how many of you in the room are communications people for the department that you work in? Okay, pay close attention to where those hands are. Okay. How many of you are responsible for communicating and working with consumers as the front line in your department? Okay. If you aren't already, those two groups of people, you need to become best friends. Because everything that the consumer frontline folks need to do, it is your job to help them get that over the finish line. That is why we do what we do. And so I like to say many times that, communicators are known for wanting to talk a lot. I think people say that after they've been with me, but people really think that talking a lot is what we do and is the primary purpose for what we accomplish every day. And I would argue that our job is to be listeners. We listen to everyone around us. We determine what the needs are, what the problems are, what the opportunities are. And so to your point, Liz, for every campaign that we do, for any of you communicators in the room, do you know what SMART goals are? If you do, raise your hand. Good for you. For those of you that don't know, SMART is an acronym. We'll talk about my dislike for acronyms at another time. But it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time-bound. You can look that up on Google. I didn't make that up. But anytime we are looking at a body of work, like what you were just talking about, all of those elements need to be addressed. When you're thinking through what you're trying to do, what is the specific thing that we're trying to accomplish? How are we going to measure that? Is it achievable? Is it relevant to the work that we need to do? Because most of us have to have a bit of an ROI for our time and the money spent and the investment for our departments, and time bound. What is the beginning? What is the end of that measurement period? Okay? So with that, we're going to talk about data-driven marketing. How do we take data, complicated data, simple data, be able to take that in, create SMART goals, and make a difference in what we do? So I just want to give a wave to Gina Thomas in the room, who's my best friend in consumer affairs in the Missouri department. Our consumer hotline campaign started several years ago because consumer affairs came to us and said, we've had a lot of storm activity, but we're really concerned that there are areas that have suffered a lot of damage and we're not getting calls from there. Well, how do they know that, right? They do intake information on the phone and through email when they talk to consumers, and they track that information. So they're gathering data, and it's not complicated. It's something that they've done for a long, long time, but they're not getting calls from rural areas. So that was the beginning of a conversation. They were very concerned that there were pockets in the state of Missouri that didn't know that we existed, that we offered services, and that they were free. So how could we help them address that need? So we created a consumer hotline campaign based on a meeting that we had when, and it may have been Gina herself that said, it's really disappointing when they call us after the fact and it's too late for us to be able to help. They've already made a bad decision. They've already waited until it's after an event and they didn't have the right coverage, all of the things. So there's regret there. So that's how that tagline, "Make us your first call," came to be, out of the conversations with the people on the front lines who want to make a difference. So we developed a campaign. We used display ads on the web. We used YouTube. For those of you that aren't familiar, things like OTT-CTV, this is, you have streaming media now. A lot of people don't watch normal TV. They have all their streaming channels, and those do have ads. And so this is ad space on those channels. Social media, billboards. Who knew, right? You know, I hadn't had to buy a billboard in years, but we decided, okay, given the areas that we're in and the lack of broadband availability at the time we started this campaign, we needed to kind of go back to some grassroots methods to be able to get people information about the existence of something. Pre-movie ads in theaters talk about a captive audience, you know, so just make sure there are some good movies launching, otherwise it's not worth the money. But
Is it expensive? I mean, I haven't,
it's reasonable.
okay.
It's reasonable. So pre-movie ads, this was the first time that I had tried that, was for this campaign. The other thing that we did that is extremely important is when you're thinking about a very specific audience that you're concerned about. I mean, you really need everybody to get this information, but how are we going to really meet the specific goals of the rural communities in our state? Rural electric cooperatives. All states have one, and they produce their own magazines that go to every household for all of their members. We started putting ads in the rural electric cooperative magazines, and still do to this day, because people read those magazines and they see those ads. So that was a learning experience, something we tried, something that doesn't cost a fortune, but it's very targeted to the audiences that we're trying to reach. So we reached out to Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, and their surrounding counties to start this campaign. Okay, so remember when I said that this needed to be time-bound? This was over a 3-month time period is when this particular campaign that I'm talking about ran first. We did the display ads. We got 7.8 million impressions. YouTube, 955,000 views because we created a video. Those streaming ads, over 1 million impressions there, and social ads, over 10 million impressions. So those drove 34,000 clicks to the website for more information over that period of time. And this is one of the graphics. It's really, you know, again, going back to simplicity, you know, the phone, make us your first call. The message is there. So that particular campaign started in 2021, and 13,022 phone calls when we started. And in 2022, the Consumer Affairs Division reported the number of phone calls had increased by 16.5% during that period of time. Now, the question that I always ask is, are we sure that it was the campaign that was responsible for that? And so together we went back and looked at all the other indicators. Was there something else that happened that could have driven things up during that time period? And the campaign was determined to be the only thing that was different during that time. And we still continue to use this campaign. As I said, it runs every month in the Rural Missouri Magazine. We do annual campaigns where we hit pretty hard at certain times of the year. Different tactics depending on what our consumer affairs folks tell us they're seeing. So the need may be different in an area from one year to the next. It's a little bit like what we tell our Medicare folks. You need to review your policy every year just to see if something's changed. You need to review your campaign goals and your marketing goals every year to see if something has changed, because things move, and we don't want to miss the opportunity to be very strategic about what we do. So in 2024, I just want to point out the end of year 17,178 phone calls. And I don't know, Gina, I think 2025 has just been a horrible year. And I think that you probably mashed all these years together and you've already gotten there. It's not the end of the year yet. Missouri's been pretty active with a lot of things. And oh, by the way, I think there are a lot of people who now know that Consumer Affairs is there and that the department is there to help. But we still have challenges. We still have challenges. The challenges right now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the major tornado that, hit in St. Louis, for instance. There have been several in the state, but in St. Louis. And getting into very inner city, urban areas is difficult for that information to get out. So we're learning a lot about the tactics that we need to use. And one tactic that is still very, very useful is going somewhere in person. So even though we talk a lot about all of these things that we do from a distance and online and all that sort of thing, sometimes people still need you to be there in person. So let's talk about water. Anybody have flood problems in your state? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to take a drink before I talk about this. So, flooding is an issue in a lot of states. As a matter of fact, things that people thought about flooding years ago, you had to live in a floodplain or you had to live near a major water source or that sort of thing. Now I think we're coming to know that flooding can happen anywhere. Through different kinds of land development, through all sorts of things that have taken place. So flood is an issue that many of us can share. So I had a conversation. Our state emergency management agency has a FEMA floodplain manager who asked for a meeting, came to us and said, hey, we've seen your earthquake campaigns, because we do earthquake communications in Missouri. If you're sitting on the opposite side of the state, you should be safe right now. But the earthquake campaign ran for several years. We're still doing that, and was successful in terms of getting knowledge out. And they said, can you help us do something like that with flood? Because the NFIP policies are really tanking. People just are not taking up flood insurance. And so we decided to give it a try. Agreed to do a beta campaign, and we were winding up the earthquake project with CIPR, and in conversations decided that flood was another area where we might be able to work together and collaborate because it was of interest to many states. So as far as that, don't let the water win, inspiration comes from many places. St. Louis Post-Dispatch had done a story that said the water always wins. And it was a very widely read story. So our campaign really just flipped that and said, don't let the water win. Take that into your hands, don't let the water win. So again, we're talking about SMART goals. We wanted to provide education and awareness about flood risk and flood insurance. Specific counties were targeted, and that was based on information from FEMA and SEMA data. Where were the counties that had repetitive flooding problems and big decreases in flood insurance? And then, of course, the demographics that we used, renters and homeowners age 21 plus, again, rural communities and those in high-risk areas of the state. And this is an image that we used in our social media and various and sundry other things, but that pushed to a designated website that we built for the purpose of collecting analytic data. It's befloodprepared.org. And one of the things that's important about that, if you're really going to get into campaigns and you really want to measure and you really want accuracy, it's a lot nicer if you set up a website to drive that traffic to so that the data is clean. You know that they got that information from one of the drivers that you put in place, and so that data came from those drivers or something related to those drivers. All right, so to do this campaign, the beta campaign, I called it, we did that in late January and February earlier this year. It's smart for us to use what we had already learned through our interactions with consumers about earthquake. So we knew, because we had already tested the messaging extensively in the earthquake study, that an urgency approach to messaging was the most likely to be successful. People would respond better to an urgency message, time's running out, clock's ticking, that sort of thing. Keep the images local. People scan and look at things, and then when they identify something that's local to them, it's home to them, it's recognizable to them, they're more likely to stop and take a look. So if you have the ability to get photography, video clips, that sort of thing that are local to you, it's likely to be more successful. And then leaning on existing content can help you. If you don't have a big team of people and you don't have really deep pockets, lean on existing content from other sources that have been tried and proven. Some of the flood materials that might have come from FEMA, from the NAIC, from other places that have been used in the past. So again, this has to be measurable, right? And it was time bound. So we had about a month, and this was the number of impressions, the number of click-throughs to the website. You'll notice that it says Hubbard owned and operated. Hubbard was the name of the company that we used to help us distribute a lot of radio messaging, all that kind of stuff. And so they also own properties. So this is just a little bit of a tip. When you're selecting companies, think about added value. What are the things that they can give you in addition to what you're paying for free? You know, they can put those ads on their own sites. They can give you public service announcements. They can do a lot of those kinds of things that you might not have asked for in that RFP. So 6,537 clicks in about a 30-day time frame. And here's a look at the website. Again, befloodprepared.org. You can go take a look at that if you're interested. And it's really just there to give people a start. This is basic flood information. This is how you get more information. Here are links that will help you prepare, right? So we started, as I said, with a beta campaign. And then that has turned into a research project that CIPR is helping us move along here. It's their research project, but we are doing a lot of the campaign marketing visuals to be able to test some of that. So there were focus groups that took place in a number of states. You can see the states that were involved. We're in the midst of a lot of the work right now. But this is good because it expands beyond just Missouri. So no matter what state you're in, you can still get insights from other states that are beneficial. So research questions that are asked in those focus groups. What do people know about flood risk? Are they prepared? Do they know what being prepared means? This one is a big one. Who do they trust for information? And what are their expectations before and after a flood? So we heard some interesting responses during the focus groups. And might I mention that I was really worried that about halfway through the focus groups, the Kerr County, Texas flood happened. So, things like that, things in life can have a potential to change people's perspectives, even if you're in the middle of focus groups and a research project, right? We didn't see that it had a massive amount of impact, in what we were hearing, but just knowing that those kinds of things can sometimes have an impact is important. Something that we heard, people don't trust the federal government or insurance companies to help them. I'm sure this is not surprising to many of you who work with consumers on a regular basis. Trust is an issue everywhere about all topics right now. Reliance on local networks and personal experience are still very important. They're crucial to what we need to listen to and what we need to do to communicate. We know that they don't really have a lot of formal flood risk awareness. Even if they live in a flood-prone area, they don't have as much information as they should have. And that they have a desire for more clarity, more localized and actionable information. Keep it simple. Keep it local. Use words people understand. And there will always and have always been barriers due to cost, time, and they don't understand that their risk is actually higher than they think it is. It hasn't happened to me, so it won't happen to me. And I think all of us in our departments have worked with people who never thought that was going to happen where they live. And they were unprepared. And they didn't make us their first call. And now they regret it. So we're working with folks along those lines. All right. Questions? Oh, there's a Dr. Brenda back there with a question. That's okay.
Probably it's just my background, growing up in a rural community, working in cooperative extension, but in rural communities where I've lived, neighbors, church, and cooperative extension
Yes, ma'am.
are very trusted sources. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
didn't hear you, and the rural co-op, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say anything about cooperative extension. Have you?
I didn't,
worked with
okay, so during the earthquake research campaign, friends, family, neighbors, local resources like that were extremely important. I didn't say that in this presentation, but you're absolutely right. We are to the point right now, we're getting ready to do the broader quantitative surveys. And I expect that, some of that will be part of the outcome that we see and report as well. But that's exactly the case. As we look at people's decreasing circle of trust in other external entities like government and insurance companies and that sort of thing, they're looking to those people who are local that they trust. So it's important for us as communicators to partner. We may not be the people who are the most successful at carrying the message or carrying the water, if you really want to use that associated with a flood campaign. But we need to work very hard to develop partnerships with local community partners to be able to get that information out. As a matter of fact, Gina and I were part of some in-person visits to St. Louis recently for that purpose, taking boxes and boxes of information and leaving it with community partners and visiting with people in some churches in St. Louis. We did with the earthquake campaign. We have not with the flood campaign yet. But that's a great reminder, and we should. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of a summit.
Yeah.